Hey guys, ghazzyTV here with another Path of Exile video. In this one we're going to talk about the Mage skeletons, which received a massive buff in the 3.13 patch notes leading up to the Ritual League. So summon skeleton mages from the Dead Reckoning unique jewel or from the Vault Summon Skeletons versions now deals 50% more damage. This is a baseline damage increase, which is absolutely disgusting. Their projectile speed has been doubled, which makes them clearing very, very effective. Now, the problem with mage skeletons is that even with these buffs, they're still mage skeletons, and therefore they're squishy, and you can bypass this with less rebirth, but I'm not sure how effective this will be in a boss fight like Maven with 10 bosses, and how they will actually stay afloat with this. So my plan is to basically make my Lich Queen build guide, which is linked in the descriptions below, which is normally using ranged specters for clearing with melee skeletons for single targets. But in this case, I'm going to rework that into using melee specters for single target and using mage skeletons for clearing, which does require me to cast the skeletons out as I'm clearing the maps, which is not a favored playstyle for most people, but it's how the build is played. The DPS I managed to pull out of these skeleton mages was about 8 million Shaper DPS in pretty trash gear. The problem is that Path of Building, after the last updates, has been having a lot of crash issues, so I'm going to start the program app and we'll see how much I have time to go through by showing you in this video. There is no forum guide version for or proper build guide video with this available right now, because I have to test this, and I will league start with this build to test it out in the coming league, and then I'll make some updates in the day or two after the league releases. So the POB here, it is using a Torrent's Reclamation. I'm not sure how expensive this will be. Worst case scenario, we'll change this into a Darkness Enthroned. It is currently using a Dover's Damning. I'm not sure if I'm going to keep this or not to get that double cursing. It kind of depends on the approach that we're going to do. Generic Ring with Life and get the resistance attributes that you need. We're going to oil Ravenous Horde on an amulet. This amulet is a +1 intelligence skill gem, which is from a Hunter influence. We have generic boots with life and movement speed, generic gloves with life, Tabula Rasa equip, which is supposed to be +1 Spectre chest further down the road. And we also have a generic Elder helmet with +3 minions and normal minion damage, which can be easily achieved with Bound Fossils, and you can do this with an 86 Elder helmet, doesn't have to be bone. Cheap as Victorious Charity, a +1 wand with a trigger at the moment, which I haven't adjusted in the skills in the POB that is listed in the descriptions below as well. I am using 1 Dead Reckoning. There's a Fortress Covenant for more damage, but most importantly, we're stacking 2 Dust Jewels. The duration is not a problem, but we're getting increased damage as well as cast speed, which is very crucial for these minions. And so far we haven't crashed yet, so that's good. Tree is super generic, no Cluster Jewel for a league start friendly approach. Gonna head out here, get some HP, get the duration, enduring bond mods, for example, going up for the jewel slot, Mystic Bulwark to get the block up to 52%, the HP with rest, and then we're just gonna pick up the extra defensive modifiers such as increased life. This is mainly for our specters, and we're gonna go for Necromantic Aegis for the Victorious Charity, which will pick up the Fortress Covenant slot here, so we don't get any of the downside of that one. Other than that, it's just picking up Sanctuary for defense nodes and glancing blows, and then just life and minion damage nodes across the board as we can get on the side. And we're picking up Death Attunement for the sake of extra specters. And that's basically very the generic approach. And we're looking at the skills. The skeletons will be going into a helmet. I'm assuming that's going to be the case because we are going to be using specters to do single targets. I am considering to put the skeletons into the 6-link chest instead and putting specters in the helmet. It all depends on how well the specters can perform in the upcoming league, and there's a few things I'm going to mention about that, but mostly we're just waiting for skeletons to see their efficiency, and I don't want to have too many gems swapping around to switch between map clearing and bossing. So the current POB is showing them in the helmet, but I might actually just put the specters in the helmet with the 6-link skeletons, because we don't really need to focus that heavily on clear speed minions. You'd rather focus the build around your single target minions. Other than that, we're going to use a flame wall to get that extra damage on the skeletons. If it turns out to not be needed, I will just take this trigger item, trigger weapon, and put the Desecrate and the Curse and Flesh Offering in here instead to ease up and make the build smoother to play. The auras to scale mages is basically Zealotry with Generosity and a Skitterbot. And then we're going to use a Hex Touch Ball Lightning, and since we're using Dover's Damning, we're also adding Sniper's Mark, which you have to self-cast because that cannot be Hex Touched. Keep that in mind. We're using some zombies in the front line to give ourselves the Feeding Frenzy. and 45 elemental army to get a little bit extra exposure by giving them some extra damage on any jewel in the future. Depends on what we get just to get some extra damage sources. But I'm not sure if I'm going to bother elemental army, but I like the extra resistances. I might just switch it and put in the golem in here for extra efficiency from the golem in terms of feeding frenzy 45. I haven't really decided with that yet. So these are just here to act as meat shields. I'm pretty certain that these minions will die. So there could be a situation where I move around the militant army for minion life instead. It depends on how much defense we can bring them up to. So basically this is just there to act as meat shields to make sure that your mage skeletons are actually kept safe and you are kept safe, because this is one of those summoner builds that lacks defensive layers. Instead we have armies of minions in the front line tanking the enemy so you don't get hit, especially in a 10 boss fight Maven arena. Golem and Guardian is in here, and in here I have them with Meat Shield to keep them safe, and then we have a Desecrate, which we might put in the trigger, and this does require me to use a Flesh Offering in an unset ring as long as I'm not using the trigger approach, and this all depends on the Flame Wall. So like I mentioned, basically the strategy with this that I'll be testing out is the efficiency of the Spectres, which I'll talk about in a sec, but most importantly, what I'm going to be checking is if we need any scaling for the skeletons to do clearing in a comfortable state at tier 16 or higher maps. And if that's not the case, then I'm going to drop this and go for the trigger, and I'll put the skeletons in a 6-link and basically juice up the helmet for higher endgame budget for the Spectres to do a deal with a single target. Spectre choices, since we are unable to see if we can scale this properly or not, I am currently looking at the Enhanced Evolved Fallen Spectres, because they use elemental hits, which would scale very well with the Zealotry and allow me to be in a position where they have the similar scaling as the Mage Skeletons. This allows me to be in a position where I go with full single target setup with them, and they can do about 800,000 Shaper DPS based on this pseudo scuffed simulation, but we're going to be using 5 Spectres with this approach. If you bring this one up to the level, it's 4 plus the chest piece to give them 1 more, you'll have 5 Spectres. And that's about a little less than 5 million Shaper DPS just from the Spectres alone in the 6-link, which can be brought up much, much higher, and that is the Enhanced Evolved Fallens. However, it's a bit scuffed with the calculations of POB, so not really sure how that's going to be. The other option is, of course, the Primal Cross Claws. However, the Primal Cross Claws, as you can see, has only 200k compared to the 800k elemental hits. But according to POB, we know for a fact that this is not correct, so I'm not really sure how we're going to approach this. On the other hand, these bad boys have 207,000 life before the nerf. So it's going to be fun to see, and I will be testing out different Spectres to see where and what kind of Spectre we're going to land on. I do want to mention a little detail, and that is that because of the way we want charges through Vix Charity, or later budget having +2 minimum power and frenzy charges, adding cluster jewels and all of this, using Pledge of Hands for a build like this is a noob trap. Don't do it. It's completely trash. You'll get much more damage doing this, even with a +1/1. Upgradable options is, of course, +2. Scaling of auras and whatnot. It's just so much better to do it without that way. But yeah, quick display of the current DPS that we see with these minions in trash gear is 498,056.8 with the lightning projectiles. The fire projectiles are 503, 510.3 without the ignition, and cold projectiles, can I please click the correct one? There we go, 369,940.3. This is divided by 3 because it's a 33% chance to spawn each type of element, so divided by 3 to get somewhat accurate numbers, depending on RNG, of course. And then since the skeletons gained a 50% more elemental damage, more base damage, I'm going to take the active minion limit, which is 10 skeletons, and I multiply that with 1.5 to bake in the damage increase we get from the patch notes. So that's 15 minions based on this, but we're only going to have 10. So multiply by 15, and you'll see that with this super, super low budget approach, we're already up on 6.8 million Shaper DPS, plus the 5 Spectres, which is another 4 million Shaper DPS when it comes to the Enhanced Evolved Fallen, according to the current state of PvP. We're not sure if this is calculating things correctly. So it's a lot of damage for no currency whatsoever. Obviously, like I mentioned, this is using Torrent Reclamation. That might be a very expensive item. We'll see. Either way, even without it, we're still doing millions upon millions of Shaper DPS in a build like this with completely scuffed gear and achievable gear that you can get within the first 24 hours of the league release. I will be testing all of these things, and I will be seeing how effective we actually can bring this build up to, and which Spectres we're going to land on, if we're going to use Range Spectres or Melee Spectres. We also have to test the Syndicate Operatives. So there's a lot of things that's going to be tested on the stream on league release. But yeah, this is all I have when it comes to the Mage Skeleton version and the information about it. If you want to check out the Lich Queen version, which is using melee skeletons with clearing specters, check that out in the build guide linked in the descriptions below. But yeah, if you guys have another approach, maybe a PvP saved or something, you want to share that to the community, hit me up in the comments below. Let me know what you think of the Skelly Mages, and don't forget to destroy the like button like they destroyed Pure Spectre builds, and subscribe for more content. Until next time, stay safe, keep rocking.